In today's program, we'll be looking at clean energy as the 8th Clean Energy Ministerial Forum is being held in Beijing. And we'll be finding out about the impact on millions of families in China as the Gaokao exams are once again being held this week. I'm Zhong Shi in for Liu Xin today. Welcome to The Point. Thank you for joining us. The 8th Clean Energy Ministerial Forum, or CEM8, is being held in Beijing this week. It is the first time for China to hold the activity since it launched in the U.S. in 2010. It is being held under the theme of tackling challenges through innovation, working together for a clean energy transition. Around 600 representatives from 26 members, 7 international organizations, and world-famous enterprises have gathered together to discuss driving clean energy policies and actions to take in the future. After the U.S.'s withdrawal from the Paris Accord, what solutions will the CEM8 provide for the international community to tackle? And what are the benefits and challenges of clean energy? I am joined by Helen Clarkson, CEO of the NGO, the Climate Group, and in Los Angeles by Dr. Woodrow Clark, Managing Director of Clark Strategic Partners, an environmental and renewable energy consulting firm. Thank you to you both for joining us today. Let me start with you, Helen. You have just come straight from the meeting. What were some of the hottest topics there today and the priorities for the leaders attending the meeting?
I think the big topic today was actually the background theme, which was the US withdrawal, or the announcement by President Trump of the intention to take the USA out of the Paris Agreement. And it was really the background music, and everyone came today wondering whether that was going to dominate things, whether people were really going to be looking in a very depressed way at what was going on. And actually what came out was a lot of positivity. Everyone was really engaged, everyone was really actually quite upbeat, saying that there are other ways to tackle this. We don't necessarily need the US government, partly because so much in the USA is happening at the state level. We've seen big announcements from California, from New York, Washington State, all big economies in their own right, saying we're going to do this anyway. We're still in the agreement, and we actually want to come here and work with China. And so some of the announcements coming out today are about China and California cooperation.
Before we head on with our discussion, the definition of clean energy, of course, expands and evolves over time. And for the average, most of our viewers probably they've heard of wind, they've heard of solar. Just help us understand a little bit better what constitutes clean energy at this point.
So when we're talking about clean energy, we're thinking mainly about carbon emissions, but also about other pollutants that fossil fuels emit. And so clean energy and renewable energy are very similar terms. Wind and solar are the ones that people have heard of, partly because they're the most economically viable at the moment. There's lots of research, there's lots of innovation going on, particularly here in China. People are looking at other energy sources. But the big breakthrough in the last few years has been around the price of those technologies, in particular solar, driven by China actually putting a lot of effort into manufacturing, which has brought the price down, and that's allowed people around the world to start seeing solar as very competitive with fossil fuels, which means that we can clean up both reducing the carbon emissions and also the pollution that affects our health.
Dr. Clark, the Clean Energy Ministerial is being held in China for the very first time, and Helen just touched upon it. It was opened shortly after the U.S.'s withdrawal from the Paris Accord. And do you think that hangs on the minds of the leaders attending?
Well, I think basically the issue is that, as was just mentioned by Helen, that the fact is the United States may have withdrawn, but there are a number of American states, including California, where I am now, and also our governor, who's in China as we speak this week, perhaps probably for that conference. So there's actually a lot of things going on that are really much opposed to the current, what's his name, the guy who's the President of the United States, what's his name? Oh yeah, Trump. And so I think what you're going to see is, since California is the 7th or 6th largest economy in the world, we're going to be very active and continuing to be active with the world programs and the UN issues that were coming up from Paris. And to be clear, by the way, I think one of the things that we have talked about here in California for the last few decades, I've been very involved in it, particularly as I was the renewable energy advisor to the governor of California at the turn of the 21st century, is that it's not a matter of being clean, because there are people who use the word clean and also with coal. That's called in English an oxymoron, two words of the opposite. So what you have to do is talk about green energy. And that's very much a topic that your current president in China has been saying by green development. Those are right on the same areas, and as Helen would say, from what I can tell as her voice sounds like she's from the UK, we would say in America, that's called being spot on. That's directly the kind of thing that we have to do, and we have to do that as a world. And you're going to see a lot of changes that are already happening. And let me just add to the definition of what green energy is. It's also geothermal. It's also combining wind with solar, because they're intermittent powers. They're not always providing energy either in your homes or to complexes or into communities. So you also have to look at hydroelectric power, which we have known for many decades has provided energy, or what we call now the run of the river. There are technologies where when the river is flowing, it's generating power, and that provides you with ongoing system and generation. You've got to look at also the possibility of ocean power and wave power, and then in addition to all of that, the technologies that are going to store this power. But above all, green energy, green development does not include nuclear power. The fact of the matter is, and I used to work at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Northern California, is nuclear power is a problem because there's no way to control or keep the waste under control.
All right, Dr. Clark, let me ask you this. How divided do you think the U.S. stance or the U.S. position is on clean energy? Because we have the withdrawal by the Trump administration from that Paris Accord, that landmark Paris Accord, but just as you said, things are happening on the state level, a lot of support there from state leaders, a lot of support there from the corporate world. Just how divided is that position right now on clean energy and the related climate issues?
How much time have we got? I mean, have we got a couple of hours? Because let me be very clear. I'm a member of the United Nations. I was started to join the UN in the 1990s, the UN IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I was also the first director for the UN's research on the when they formed the Framework Convention for Climate Change. And the fact of the matter is, today I'm now involved with the UN on what they call the G20 and now the B20 Task Force on Finance and Infrastructure. I'm on that board. And the reason I mention that is because we are going to continue working on these issues whether Trump has anything to do with it or not. And by the way, Trump may not be around for long. The clock is ticking. I won't even go into that. But the fact of the matter, the economy in America is very much going green and has been for the last decade, and it will continue to do so. So we want to see jobs created. We want to see reduction of pollution in the environment and water and other areas. And I call it today, by the way, forget about global warming and climate change. It's called climate preservation. That's what we have to do, and we have to also know what it costs, how we finance it, and where those resources come from. And by the way, it doesn't all come from the private sector. It's got to come from government.
All right. Now, let me turn back to Helen here in our Beijing
I could go on. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you for your insight. We're just trying to get more questions asked in our very limited time here. Helen, your organization held a side event at the meeting, which is called Under 2 Clean Energy Forum, and you worked as a moderator to discuss how to achieve the triple benefits of clean air, decarbonization, and economic development. You've also had discussion with the governor of the state of California, Jerry Brown, and other speakers. Share with us some of those conclusions.
Yeah, so the Under 2 Clean Energy Forum was bringing together the Under 2 coalition, which was actually something that Governor Brown started. He initiated actually with a state in Germany prior to Paris, which brings together now 170 jurisdictions from around the world who've signed up, a lot of subnational governments, also some cities. We have some countries that endorse it. So they've signed up to commit to under 2 tons of emissions. And really what we're seeing there is leadership at the subnational level, states, regions. We had the Vice Governor of Sichuan province on the stage with him. And what was coming out of that meeting was really showing how broad these commitments are, and also that it's now the time for action. So Governor Brown spoke from the stage, and there was a real call to action from him. He was really sort of galvanizing the crowd and asking everyone to really step up to the plate. Also telling them that it's not easy. I think we've heard just there how much work there is to do, but helping people see there is an economic opportunity. We had states there. We had KwaZulu-Natal, which is a new state, signed up today from South Africa. Completely different economy to California, but seeing them at lunchtime, talking to one another and seeing what they can learn from each other, that's really what the Under 2 is about. People around the world working together and governments looking at one another, learning from one another, sharing policy, so not everyone is having to do this from scratch.
Also, Helen, China plans to spend more than $360 billion by 2020 on renewable power sources, and it should create more than 13 million jobs in the renewable energy sector. How do you view the Chinese commitment when it comes to clean energy?
I think this has been exciting people in the climate community for a long time. This isn't just a reaction to President Trump's announcement last week. There's been a lot of press about it in the last week, but actually it started last year with the new 5-year plan that was announced last March, where you see this huge investment. And I think we're seeing these two levels. So one is this big investment in innovation and seeing that as the future of the economy. And the other we've been seeing for a while is this investment in manufacturing that we talked about before, which is bringing the price down. So I think everyone's very excited about what China is doing in this area, and seeing some specific things coming out today of China and California saying we're going to lead this together is very exciting to see.
Dr. Clark, investment-wise, China's efforts have been very visible. I want to get your take on what China has been doing well with promoting clean energy and what it has been not doing so satisfactorily.
Well, again, it's green energy, and it's because it's more than clean. Let's put it that way. I mean, people are aware today that the diesel source for fuel for cars coming from Germany was incorrect, if not fraudulent, information and statistics that was done in the 1990s. And I actually witnessed and saw some of that then. But the fact of the matter is, when you talk about green energy, you're talking about a very different kind of source. That source has got to be something that also can be measured and combined with other sources. In other words, when you've got solar during the day, and you have wind mostly at night, and you combine those two, you integrate those systems, and you're making those systems integrated not only with energy but with water, with transportation, and with waste. And that's the thing that we have to be doing, is looking at the economics of all of this. It's one of the reasons I refer to myself as a qualitative economist, because I want to know the answers to questions, including the definitions of words like green or even clean. And the reason I say that is because if we're not on the same page, we have to realize that even in the translation aspects of it, we've got to be, and we've got to work together. That gets to what I would call, if you will, the economics. The economics
Dr.
of this
Clark,
is
I'm
not
so sorry
some
to
of
cut
the
you off,
things
but that is all the
West.
time we have today for this topic. Thank you so much for your insight, Helen Clarkson, CEO of the Climate Group, and Dr. Woodrow Clark, Managing Director of Clark Strategic Partners. Thank you for your time. The reasons for clean energy are obvious to all. They range from reducing greenhouse gas emissions to battling air pollution, improving energy security, and creating high-tech jobs while fostering innovation. Every country will have its own priorities in determining what is most appropriate. But as clean energy is increasingly driven by the emerging economies, global political leadership in advancing clean energy will be increasingly shared. That has to be a good thing for us all. Welcome back to The Point. This year marks the 40th anniversary in China of Gaokao, the college entrance exam which has changed people's destinies for decades. From June 7th to 9th, 9.4 million teenagers are going into the battlefield to fight for their futures. On Monday in Anhui province in the southeastern part of China, thousands of people voluntarily went out onto the street to escort the candidates' buses, taking them to the exam room. How much a person's whole life and how much does one exam shape social values in China? To find out more, I'm joined by Malik Nabi, an internet personality, and Li Xi, a lecturer at Beijing Foreign Studies University. Welcome to The Point. Well, the Chinese are in a love-hate relationship with Gaokao, aren't they? I mean, for me, probably more hate than love, but they love it because with Gaokao, which is branded as one of the fairest tests in China, no matter what background you come from, if you do well with the Gaokao exams, new doors, new opportunities will be opened for you. But they also hate it because of the stress and the pressure building up, leading up to that very day when the test is taken. How do you remember your Gaokao experience? Do you more love it or hate that experience? Let me start with you, Li Xi.
Thank you very much, Zhongxu, for your question. Definitely it's a mixed feeling. But I want to take this opportunity to first briefly express to all the candidates of high school students, wish their best. And in these 2 days Gaokao. And for me personally, it's been 15 years since I sat in my own Gaokao exams. I don't actually remember in specific what happened in those 2 or 3 days, but I remembered how long and how hard I had been preparing for those 2 or 3 days. It's definitely one of the most important period of my life, if not deciding, but very important to influence my path of education after the exam. I remember I was probably, especially the last year, the third year of my senior high school, every day I spent most of my time studying. I was the first one went to classroom and the last one to leave, and I was not alone. I have a great and a class of students who we're working together, and we fight every minute. We knew it was probably back to them the only chance that we can get access to our higher education. So to me, it was a life-shaping experience, if not deciding. I remember very vividly those days, the meaning of those days to me.
Mali, you represent a trend, a growing trend here in China, where students choose to have a college education abroad outside of China. You did take the exam, but only after you got an offer from an overseas university. What was it like for you?
Well, I didn't have to go through the whole process of Gaokao, but I still took it, and it wasn't a very delightful experience to be honest. But all my friends and my families, and some of my really close classmates, they have been through the whole process, and I can tell you it's a madness, and they're not only being tortured physically but also mentally. They have to study like 15, 16 hours a day, only sleep like 3-4 hours a day, having no days off. It was a madness, and I'm really glad that I don't have to go through the whole process. But I mean, it's a fair game, but at the same time, it's not a very fun experience. And also, kids are learning contents that they will probably never use in their life. That weren't useful, and also it wasn't very practical as well. So I didn't really like it, and I'm glad I wasn't part of it.
Well, if we look at the U.S. equivalent to Gaokao, the SATs, it's a hard test. Students prepare relentlessly for the test, but unlike the United States, students in China often take the whole family's hopes to the exam room. In many places in China, parents, even grandparents, would view Gaokao as the top priority and even give up their jobs to better take care of the students. How does it feel when your whole family's happiness is relying on you? If you were in the shoes of those students whose families' hopes are pinned on them, does it make a person stronger or weaker to have your family standing behind you but with high hopes, Li Xi?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, that actually was my case. My whole family supported me, and I was very motivated. I was very self-motivated, but I also know that I need to work hard so that I would not fail my parents, but more because I understand the years in Gaokao. It's an experience, if you're taking at the positive side of it. It's an experience of building one's self-discipline, of knowing that you must work hard to get what you want. And when I reflect those days, I think the impact to me is, when you look at the positive side, it's not about specifically I learn what kind of knowledge. It's about cultivating myself a habit of working hard, cultivating myself a habit of managing my time well for different subjects. I think somehow that's also a skill to get adapted to the competitive society, nowadays competitive society as well. And when I record those days, I think what I gain from those days is not exactly about a specific content of knowledge. And I worked, and through my work, my hard work of those days, I got rewarded because I get access to college, and I continued my education. My family was happy, but moreover, it's a fortune for me because only in that circumstance, I think would I work hard like that, because I understand that's my past, and understand that's a cruel but somehow still nowadays a relatively equal chances for us to get our path to university education. But I also reflect because I'm an educator now, so the studies in those days is is it really about education in terms of what I want for my life or career in the future, or it is about being adaptive to the system, to what's the Gaokao ask to be able to get more chances. So it has its gains and has its loss, but still one could draw positive significance from this experience.
Malik, your take on this phenomenon, how do you explain it to your foreign friends, for example? Why is this not just the matter of the student in the question? Why is a whole family pitching in to help?
Well, you know what? I actually think a lot of families and a lot of people in China are over-evaluating this exam, and they're making this exam, making the students feel like this is the most important thing in their life. But however, are there a lot of people care about what happened afterwards? Do you know a lot of students actually, they were really motivated, just like what Li Shi said. They were really motivated, and they were really hardworking, and they finished the exam, and then what? They had no other goal. You know, their parents told them that this is the only thing you have to work for. But after that, when they get into college, they do whatever they want. You know, rarely parents care about how their kids are doing in school after they went to college. All they care about is the exam. And what the real knowledge that you have to learn is in college, well, relatively useful. But a lot of kids are only working hard for this exam, and they think this is, like, if you didn't do well on this exam, your life is set. It's actually not. People should focus on the bright side. You know, like the Gaokao is not only the only chance that you can actually change your life. So I explained to my to some of my foreign friends that, you know, a lot of, like, some of the parents that probably haven't experienced a lot, they think this is the only way that they know that they can change their kids' life. So that's why there are so many parents and grandparents are working so hard for just only one kid to make sure this kid can get a good score and get into college. But you know, what happened afterwards is really matter. What you can do in college and what you learn, it really matters to your life.
I think the way people think of Gaokao has been changing in the Chinese society, but for the vast majority of Chinese high school students, it still remains the only option, the necessary option, the must-take option for them after graduating. And with this importance attached to these exams, we've had some very extreme cases before. For example, in Changsha, in southern China, we had a case where a mother was hit by a car when she was escorting her daughter to take the Gaokao exam. The daughter was immediately faced with the choice of either going with her mother to the hospital or carrying on to the test room, and it just caused a huge debate about just how important the Gaokao was. And in this specific case, what would the choice be for the daughters? If you ever found yourself in that case, what would be your choice, Li Xi?
Well, thank you for that question, because it happens, I actually come from Changsha, that area. And first I want to say I feel pretty tragic to hear the story, because at that moment I think a daughter probably would have to find some ways to assist her mother, to influence her Gaokao. And I remember back in my days, I was pretty independent. My family supported me, but I did not, they didn't, I was at a boarding school, so they did not actually stay and provide me everything. I think that's a lesson that Chinese parents needs to learn, and Chinese children needs to learn as well, is that you're learning, however hard it is in the Gaokao, under the Gaokao pressure, your learning is your own business that you need to manage. Your parents provide you everything, but in terms of the details in your life about, for example, you do not have to ask your parents. Maybe parents voluntarily wants to do this, but you somehow need to be a grown-up or independent person at that situations to comfort
we
your parents.
are running out of time here on the program. Before we go, I'd like to ask this to both of you. Li Xi, you studied very hard for the Gaokao exam. You took it very wholeheartedly, not like Malik. Did you think that experience emboldened you, that experience empowered you?
Okay, I think that experience somehow empowered me, like in shaping my personality, as I said previously, about good learning habit and self-motivated learning and also self-discipline. I think they all work as a very good, let's say, fortune for me to continue my education in the future. But I also think that our Gaokao system needs to have more reform. how can we maximize the flexibility under the system so that students could have more choices, and probably the school could also have more rights to select what kind of students they want under the current system. And the content of the exam already is taking some changes, but it needs further reform to make it more adapted to nowadays society and the requirement for talents. For example, not just from scores, but also about overall quality of students besides academic performance. I really think there's a lot of things that we need to deal with to make Gaokao into a more fair but also effective way to select the talents for universities in our country.
Li Shi, thank you. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have for now. Malik Nabi, Internet personality, and Li Shi, lecturer from Beijing Foreign Studies University. Thank you for your time. For 40 years, Gaokao has served as the most equal playing field in China. No matter where you're from, rich or poor, you can get an equal chance to fight your way to college and change your destiny. Gaokao weighs heavily on teenage candidates, their families, and in some rural areas, even on whole communities. Nowadays, Chinese teenagers have more options, such as going abroad, going to technician training schools, or even starting their own businesses. But Gaokao still serves as the major method of moving on to a higher level and getting a decent life. Gaokao is a part of Chinese culture. Striving hard for the future you want, your destiny lies in your own hands. Thank you for watching The Point. As always, follow The Point on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle @ThePointWithLX. Download our application called CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices. Or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. I hope you will join us again tomorrow.